welcome to this fresh edition of ET Insight, the one show that brings you a 360-degree view of the big picture that's driving business and economy. I'm Supriya Srinath, and over the next 30 minutes, here's what we have for you on the show today. The government is hoping to move the Lokpal or the Ombudsman bill in Parliament in the monsoon session. So just how will this bill change governance and how robust is our current legal system? What is the price that Indian economy has paid for the large-scale corruption? And an exclusive chat with Shanti Bhushan, the national co-convener of the Lokpal Bill Drafting Committee, on whether the new bill would be an effective way to tackle corruption. Straight on to our top story then. India is a perfect example of how a weak judicial system can breed criminals. The laws governing corruption are archaic and implementation is painfully slow. In fact, on the face of it, it almost seems that these laws were designed to favor the wrongdoers rather than booking them. But fortunately for us, all of that could change very soon. Asha Gopalakrishnan has more details.
हमें सिस्टम को बदलना है, करप्शन को काबू में लाने के लिए सिस्टम को बदलना है।
Celebrations demonstrating the coming of age of a democracy, where civil society will participate in drafting laws to deal with corruption. So why did millions of people have to take to the streets to be heard by a government that is of the people, by the people, and for the people? And how much of the problem can be addressed by the new Lokpal bill?
जन लोकपाल बिल आना चाहिए, आएगा, लेकिन उसके बाद जुडिशियल रिफॉर्म्स की बात होनी चाहिए, अच्छी न्याय व्यवस्था होनी चाहिए, चुनाव सुधार की बात होनी चाहिए, इलेक्टोरल रिफॉर्म्स की बात होगी, उसके बाद डिसेंट्रलाइजेशन ऑफ पॉलिटिकल पावर की बात होगी। इन सारे मुद्दों को हम एक-एक करके उठाना चाहते हैं।
What makes this bill important is the fact that India does not have an overarching anti-corruption law. Corruption comes under several laws like the Indian Penal Code, Prevention of Corruption Act, the Companies Act and Prevention of Money Laundering Act. These multiple set of laws make conviction difficult because each has a different set of loopholes. What makes matters worse is the fact that anti-corruption agencies like the Central Vigilance Commission or the CVC and the Central Bureau of Investigation or the CBI are often in the midst of controversies themselves. That's not all. Until January this year, they were burdened with 9,919 pending cases which were under trial in CBI courts.
We have far too few judges for the number of cases. Our judge strength is not increasing because when we go out to recruit judges, we don't have applicants because our salaries are abysmally low. And the political system has a vested interest in continuing this stalemate.
Apart from having a fragile legal system, India lags behind because it doesn't have the required infrastructure and resources to carry forward proceedings. Most of the cases are complicated and involve a large number of witnesses. Data collection and scientific and forensic examination of exhibits is tedious and cumbersome. And finding legal advice on investigations is tough.
We don't have the adequate number of courts. We don't have the adequate number of investigators. CBI is always short of staff. We don't have the adequate numbers of prosecutors. Our jails are full to the brim. So therefore, there is a need for greater investments in the criminal justice system.
What aggravates the problem is the rising number of cases against government or public sector officials. In the past 3 years, CBI registered 1,852 cases against government officials, 16 cases against IAS officers and 5 against IPS officers. That then takes a direct hit at the government's bureaucratic setup and lays even more emphasis on rationalizing accountability. Laws like the Central Civil Services Rules 1964 lay down the code of conduct for central government employees to disclose personal assets and financial dealings periodically. But experts say the law is lenient.
I've never heard of anybody proactively going and validating all the facts which are presented. That means actually going on the ground and actually checking bank accounts, checking assets, checking all of this. And number two is actually trying to figure out the gap, from the 2 years back to current year. If the person has actually grown by 500%, where is the source of money been? I mean, how has he grown 500%? Actually doing some diligence.
The story is similar with members of parliament. The Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha Declaration of Assets and Liabilities Rules 2004 specified that every member must submit an annual statement of assets within 90 days of taking the oath, and that the declarations made by MPs have to be updated every year. Yet, there is little or no record of the disproportionate assets owned by them. That's despite the fact that under the Representation of the People Act 1951, non-disclosure of assets amounts to a breach of privilege of the House. But there are no severe penalties that act as a deterrent for failing to disclose as required or for making false or misleading disclosure. These violations of parliamentary norms have seen 110 Lok Sabha MPs failing to declare their assets even 8 months after their election to the 15th Lok Sabha.
A lot of corruption starts off when somebody decides to run for election. I mean, today I don't know of any election anywhere in this country that doesn't require large sums of money. We need to stop that first. So if you don't need to pay to get elected, then as you serve as an elected representative of the people, maybe your thirst for money would be far reduced.
According to Global Integrity Index 2010, India struggles to promote and implement transparency in the financing of political parties and candidates. Parties are bound by law to maintain accounts regularly, record and disclose names of donors contributing more than 10,000 rupees and have their accounts audited by a qualified accountant. But regulating the financing of political parties is tough, because conflicts of interest laws governing the executive, legislative and judicial branches of government are absent or are overlapping.
The best way to keep the system honest is to have a very, very robust form of disclosures. So a Rajya Sabha MP must disclose his interest, must be clearly prevented from participating in legislations or participating in deliberations that are an inherent conflict of interest if he has business interests. And we should bring the concept of even indirect beneficial interest.
Here, India can take lessons from the developed world, which has designated and concrete anti-corruption laws. The US relies on its Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, and UK has recently amended and passed the Anti-Bribery Act, taking into account considerations of the industry. China too has followed suit. It has amended its criminal law and tweaked its corruption legislation.
There are lots of best practices that we can take from other countries where you've reduced monopolies, reduced discretion and increased accountability in public services. I think that we must recognize that there's no single answer to this because it's happening in hundreds of thousands of examples across the country. We have to solve these in very localized ways.
To be fair, the government is doing its bit to spruce up India's legal framework. The 13th Finance Commission has recommended a grant of 5,000 crore rupees to be utilized over a period of 5 years up to 2010-2015 for improving justice delivery. This grant is being allocated for initiatives such as increasing the number of court working hours using the existing infrastructure, enhancing support to Lok Adalats to reduce the pressure on regular courts, providing additional funds to state legal services authorities, and promoting the alternate dispute resolution mechanism to resolve part of the disputes outside the court system. But is it good enough? Well, at least it's a step in the right direction. India still has a long way to go before it fills the significant gap between planning and implementation. And how long that will take is anybody's guess. As of now, the country's corruption is at its murkiest best.
The bad news is that corruption and economic growth are interrelated. So then the question is that what is the price that India is paying to accommodate poor governors? Find out on the other side of this very short break. We'll be back in a moment.